Hi, it's Elise here at Bowman Library with a whole new middle grade book spotlight. So this week we are taking some inspiration from an event that happened this week 110 years ago, and that would be the fateful voyage and sinking of the Titanic. So that means all the books we're taking a look at this week are inspired by the Titanic in some way, shape, or form. And what's amazing about this topic is there have been so many books that have been written about it that there's literally something for everyone depending on what it is that you want to do. There's nonfiction, there's fiction with a re-imaged twist. So we have 6 we're going to take a look at. So let's get started. Our first one is the Titanic, an interactive history adventure. And what I love about this one, it is a choose your own adventure book based on historical events. Now, this lets you go on board the Titanic and you will be making your own choices. And basically, you're the one who's going to end up figuring out if you're going to live or if you're going to die on this fateful voyage. There are 28 different storylines. You're able to be different characters, such as a crew member or a first-class passenger or a third-class passenger. And then, again, it's going to be your decisions. And they're going to either get you to safety or you're going to end up in the freezing water. Maybe or maybe not being rescued. Now, there are others in this series as well. So maybe if you're not sold on the Titanic, but you love a good choose your own adventure book, there are others that deal with other events or time periods in history. So feel free to explore those as well. But this one is all about the Titanic and making sure you figure out if you can survive or not. This is the Titanic, an interactive history experience. Voyage on the Great Titanic. Now, this is a Dear America book, so it is told in diary format. And this is all about growing up in 1912. An orphaned Margaret Ann is living in London, and she really wants to leave the city and head to America to find her brother who is living there, so that way she can have a family. She can have somewhere where she belongs. Things aren't going so well for her, but then her luck turns when she meets this wealthy woman who's living in London from America. Her name is Mrs. Carstairs, and Mrs. Carstairs wants to return back to America. And she asks Margaret Ann to accompany her, so she's not making this voyage by herself. Soon, Margaret Ann finds herself with Mrs. Carstairs on board this new ship that everyone's talking about called the Titanic, and it's going to be an amazing voyage. She's in first class, she's making sure Mrs. Carstairs is taken care of, she's making new friends, but as she's enjoying this voyage immensely and trying new things, one evening disaster strikes and no one knows what is going to happen next every minute. This, again, told in diary format from Margaret Ann's perspective about like the before, the during, even the after. You will learn about this tragic event through this first-person account. Now, we have others in the Dear America series, just like the Choose Your Own Adventure one. If maybe you're not feeling the Titanic, but you want to read another one of these, we have plenty of others. Feel free to ask and we'll help you get there. But this one is Voyage on the Great Titanic. Titanic Sinks. I love this book. If you are looking for just a nonfiction book, talks about the Titanic, this is the one for you. Now, what I love about this book is we don't just start the Titanic setting off. What Barry Denenberg does is he goes all the way back to 1903, because that is when the first ideas for this ship are explored. They're inspired. And then what he does is he walks you through, starting in 1903, the process that this was undertook. The designing, the planning, the construction of it, like the technology at the time behind it. You know, even things like who decided what was going to be inside. Because believe it or not, there was a lot of stuff that had to be put on board that ship, that had to be picked out, like beds. Someone had to pick them out, someone had to buy them, someone had to put them on board. It's like all about this stuff you don't even think about, but the author does. Now, this is designed to look like a newspaper. Okay, ta-da. Okay. There's filled with so many primary photos, there's maps, there's a full-on diagram that you can pull out, there's drawings, and you will learn way more about the Titanic. I learned a ton that I didn't even know when I read this book, especially the whole design process behind it. I strongly encourage you, if you just are going to read one book about the Titanic, nonfiction, I would make it this one. This is Titanic Sinks. It will make you appreciate this ship even more than what you already do. Titanic sinks. SOS Titanic. So this is an historical fiction take on one of the most famous ships in natural disasters in history. Now we follow 15-year-old Barry O'Neill. As he boards it, he joins the first class on the Titanic in order to get to his parents in New York City. So his parents are in New York City, he's gonna go join them. And then we also meet brothers Johnny and Frank, who are traveling with their sister. But they're not in first class, they're in third class. We then see how this disaster unfolds, how their experience was on board before the iceberg, after the iceberg, through these varying different perspectives. If you want a first class perspective and a third class perspective that's true to what happened, highly recommend it. SOS Titanic. Casper the Titanic Cat. So Johnny is living in London and he's working as a bellboy at the Ritzy Savoy Hotel, and he's an orphan. He needs to do what he needs to do in order to survive. He has a room at the hotel, but he has to work in order to have his room. Working at this hotel, though, he gets to meet people he never would have before, and he gets to make some friends with the guests. For example, there's this wealthy Russian singer that's there who has this cat named Casper, and then there's this American girl named Elizabeth who's his age, and they soon become friends, and they start hanging out whenever Johnny has time away from his job. It is when the Russian singer that's staying there tragically dies that Johnny decides he's going to take Casper. He's going to take the cat, he's going to keep the cat in his room, even though he's not allowed to, and he's going to make sure nothing happens to Casper. Casper, though, ends up becoming fast friends with Elizabeth, and when it's time for Elizabeth and her family to return to the United States, Johnny agrees that she can bring Casper with her. Johnny then goes with Elizabeth and her family to the ship, and it's there that Johnny makes this split decision that he's going to sneak on board, he's going to stow away on board the Titanic because he wants to go to the United States too. Gets on board, soon he's discovered and he's put to work in the boiler room, so you get that whole experience. And then when disaster strikes, it's going to be up to Johnny to try to save Elizabeth and her family as well as Casper. And if they're going to make it out alive, it's going to be up to him. Now, I will tell you this does not have a sad ending. I don't do animal stories. This one does not have a sad ending. I can promise you that. But it provides a different perspective as the events unfold on board the Titanic, as well as the reaction by the world afterwards, especially as the survivors are brought to New York City and they are greeted by reporters and everyone else who wants to know what happened. This is Casper the Titanic Cat. And our last one for today is A Ranger in Time, Disaster on the Titanic. This is part of the Ranger in Time series. This is about a golden retriever whose name is Ranger, and he gets sent back in time when he gets into this mysterious box, and the only way he ever gets to come home is there's a specific task that he has to do while there. There's someone he has to save. There's someone he has to help. And when his mission is accomplished, even though he doesn't know what that mission is, once it's done, it's accomplished, he is then sent back to his home. So Ranger gets in this box, and then all of a sudden he finds himself in 1912 in this city called Belfast, and it's where the Titanic is being built. So we get to start right in the shipyards. This is where the Titanic is being built. Ranger meets 13-year-old Patrick Murphy, and he's part of the construction crew. When Ranger's there, he saves Patrick from these boards that are falling down. Ranger thinks, okay, I've saved Patrick, that must have been what my mission is. But Ranger doesn't get sent back home. So before Ranger knows it, he is with Patrick, he's on, the Titanic gets finished, Patrick finds himself as a member of the crew on board, and Ranger's with him. And Ranger, again, is with Patrick because there must be something else he is supposed to do with all of this. But as they set off, Ranger doesn't know what this is destined for. And soon he and Patrick find themselves in a race against time, and if Ranger's going to make his way home, he's going to have to accomplish whatever he needs to fast. If you like your time-traveling mysteries and with some adventures and a dog is the main character, again, nothing bad happens to Ranger, I can promise you that. then this series is a must read. This is book 9 in the series. You can read them out of order, but each one goes back in time to a different period or time in history, so you might find yourself hooked on this series. This is the Ranger in Time series. This is Disaster on the Titanic. So these are just 6 of the books we have here at the library that are about the Titanic in some way, shape, or form. Again, there's some amazing nonfiction books. There's some fiction books, some that stay true to the events, others that take a unique look at the events. Highly encourage all of them, especially if you want to become a Titanic expert. So come on out, check out one of these, or we have others that we will gladly help you find. I hope you have a great week, and I hope you turn back next week. We have a whole new middle grade book spotlight.